Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, I'm Shanedelle Norford.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
Where are you currently employed?
I work with my own consulting company currently.
You're with where, I'm sorry?
My own consulting company.
Okay, and what do you do in that consulting company?
I do forensic pathology work, expert witness work, as well as medical malpractice cases.
Where did you work before your consulting company?
The District 5 Medical Examiner's Office in Leesburg.
How long did you work there?
2.5 years.
From what period of time?
Between 2021 and the end of 2023.
Can you describe to the jury your educational background and experience that allows you to do forensic pathology?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the University of the Virgin Islands, a Master's degree in Criminal Justice from Kaplan University. I have a medical degree from Boston University School of Medicine. I completed a 4-year combined residency program in clinical pathology and anatomic pathology from Orlando Regional Medical Center, after which I completed a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office. And I'm board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
As a medical examiner, what were your duties? What did you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure, on a daily basis, I perform forensic autopsies, determine cause and manner of death, review toxicology reports, and approve cremations.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in Florida?
I am.
All right. You mentioned a couple terms. First, pathology. What is that?
Pathology is the study of disease by definition.
You mentioned clinical pathology.
Sure.
What is that?
So clinical pathology is the study of disease based on the analysis of liquid tissues, so blood, urine, laboratory medicine in the general sense.
And I think you then mentioned anatomical pathology. What is that?
So anatomical pathology is the study of disease based on the examination of solid tissues. So we're looking at organs, any biopsies, and it also includes some autopsies as well.
And finally, you mentioned the term forensic pathology. What is that?
So forensic pathology is a branch of pathology that deals with performing forensic autopsies and determining the cause and manner of death from those autopsies.
Can you estimate about how many autopsies you've performed in your career?
Over 3,000.
You said you were board certified in certain areas. First, what areas are you board certified in?
Sure. Clinical pathology, anatomic pathology, and forensic pathology.
And what is involved in becoming board certified? What does that mean?
So you first have to complete a certain amount of training requirements. In this case, I probably did 5 years of additional training on top of medical school. After fulfilling certain requirements, you have to take several examinations and pass them as well.
Can you describe for the jury what an autopsy is and what it involves?
Sure. An autopsy involves examination of a body of somebody who's deceased. So you examine the body from head to toe, front to back. You're noting everything from the color of the eyes, the color of the hair, any scars, any tattoos, any unusual marks. You're also noting any injuries or diseases that you find as you go along.
Have you been permitted to give opinion testimony in the field of forensic pathology in court before?
I have
Can you estimate about how many times?
around 45 or 50.
Your Honor, I'd ask that this witness be permitted to provide opinion testimony in the field of forensic pathology.
Any objection of voir dire?
No objection, Your Honor.
I'll allow her to testify and form an opinion, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to direct your attention to June 3rd of 2023. Did you perform an autopsy on a woman named Ajika Owens?
I did.
How did Miss Owens' body arrive to the medical examiner's office?
So we got a call from law enforcement about a shooting that occurred. In this case, she had already been transported to the hospital. So after we got a call, investigation took all the information, and then her body was later transported from the hospital to her office.
And where is the office of the medical examiner located in the 5th District?
It's in Leesburg.
Is a unique case number assigned to each autopsy that is performed by the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
What was the autopsy number associated with the autopsy of Miss Owens?
It was ME 23-1380.
How old was Miss Owens?
She was 35.
How tall was she?
5 feet 7 inches,
And how much did she weigh?
293 pounds.
During the course of the autopsy that you performed, were photographs taken of Miss Owens as well as the injuries that you noticed on her?
Yes, photographs were taken.
Showing Mr. Mark's case with a Y for identification. Take a look at that item, the photos in it, and see if you recognize them.
Yes, I do.
Generally, what are those photos?
So the autopsy photos taken at the time of the examination.
Now, do they fairly accurately depict Ms. Owens as well as her injuries and items you may have recovered from her body?
They do.
This time, the state would move Y into evidence as 16, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
States Y being evidence is states number 16.
May I have access to the TV?
I put it on there, but they had something else on there. Make sure you got what you want on there.
Plugged in. Your Honor, if you could take that off 1 second and try to fix it.
Yeah.
It's plugged in and hard.
While Mr. Smith is working on that, Doctor, during the autopsy, was law enforcement present?
In this case, they weren't.
Okay. Did you see any evidence of medical treatment on Ms. Owens's body?
Yes, she had several pieces of medical evidence. She had defibrillator pads on her chest. She also had an intravenous catheter in one of her legs as well.
I can go old school. Photograph 1 of state 16. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
And is that the person that you performed the autopsy upon?
it is.
Did you locate any injuries to Ms. Owens's hand during the course of the autopsy?
Yes.
Describe the injury that you located.
So she had a superficial injury, what we call an abrasion, to the right hand.
Showing photograph 2 of state 16, does that indicate does that represent the injury that you noticed?
Yes, it is.
Can you describe the injury to the jury?
So the injury was pink purple in color, superficial, meaning it was just like just a superficial part of the skin that was injured, nothing deeper.
Not considered a life-threatening injury.
No, it was not.
Is the appearance of the injury, in your opinion, consistent with being caused by a projectile or a graze from a projectile?
It's not.
Why not?
So with projectile wounds or graze wound, you have certain characteristics. For instance, a graze wound is a wound that's caused from the projectile scraping over your skin. With those wounds, they tend to be like more elongated, and you tend to have what's called skin tags pointing in the direction that the projectile is coming from. With, say, an entrance type gunshot wound, it's more like round, regular punched out. And in this case, it's only one superficial wound. Like I said, there's nothing deeper, so there's no penetration at all.
Could you tell based on the appearance of the injury whether the injury was fresh or had begun healing?
It was fresh.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as far as what could have caused that injury?
It could have caused by several things. Maybe, her hand hitting the floor as she fell, or maybe something from the door, something hitting her hand.
Did you locate a gunshot wound on Ms. Owens?
Yes, I did.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute, but in your opinion, the injury to her right wrist was not consistent with a gunshot wound, correct?
Correct.
I understand. Did you also take x-rays of Ms. Owens' body prior to performing the autopsy?
Yes, we did.
And why is that done?
We take X-rays to see whether or not there are any projectiles within the person, and if there is projectile, then we want to know where the projectile is located. That way, we can access the projectile easily while doing the autopsy.
Showing you photograph 3 of state 16, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And do you notice the projectile in the x-ray?
It's hard to see, actually. I can't see from that.
That better?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. And where is that on the photograph? That's I'm going to show it to the jury in a second. Where was
So it's on the right abdomen area.
Okay. My finger located where it is?
Yes.
Okay. And what we're looking at is a kind of a white object type area in the x-ray?
Correction, yes, correct.
Did you locate the corresponding gunshot wound on Miss Owens's body?
Yes, I did.
Where was that located?
It was on the right side of the chest.
Show me photograph 4 of state 16. What does this photograph show?
That shows the entrance gunshot wound on the right chest.
And can you point yourself where that was located?
Sure. So it was about right here.
Okay. And can you tell by the appearance of the gunshot wound whether it's an entrance wound or exit wound?
Yes, I can.
How can you tell that?
So entrance gunshot type wounds are more what we call regular, somewhat round or a little ovoid. They tend to be more punched out, whereas exit gunshot wounds are typically irregular, almost like the projectile tearing the skin as it exits.
Did you find an exit wound?
There was none.
Is that consistent with the x-ray showing the presence of projectile inside of her body?
It is.
All right. Did you locate any soot around the entrance wound?
There was none.
Okay, and what is meant by soot and why is that significant?
So soot is completely burned gunpowder. It's almost like it's dust-like, so it wipes off easily. And when soot is present, it tells us that it's a close gunshot wound within 6 inches.
Did you locate any what's called stippling around the entrance wound of the gunshot?
There was none.
What is stippling?
So stippling, it's unburnt gunpowder particles now. And with stippling, it tends to have like bigger particles causing superficial injury to the skin. And it's more permanent. We call it tattooing because it looks like little black marks around the wound. And you tend to see stippling with intermediate range gunshot wounds. So from like 6 inches to about 2.5 feet.
Would you expect to find any soot or stippling in the entrance wound of this gunshot if she was shot through a door?
I would not, because in this case, there was an intermediate target. So any soot or stippling would actually be on the door and not on her.
And you're not saying there would be soot or stippling on the door, but if it was going to be there, it would be on the door as opposed to in her body?
Correction, as it depends on the range of fire from the door.
Okay. Can you describe to the jury the damage that the projectile caused as it entered her body and proceeded through it?
Sure. So the projectile entered the right side of the chest. It then hit the 4th rib, after which it went through her right lung. It went through the heart. It went through the esophagus. It also went through the aorta, after which it went through the diaphragm, the spleen, and it was recovered from the left lower abdomen area.
Can you describe the path of travel the projectile took?
Sure. So it went from right to left and downward.
And can you point where the projectile was actually located?
Sure. Can I stand?
Yes, ma'am.
So entrance was here, and the projectile was found around this area.
Now, I know we see on TV all the time that medical examiners are able to say exactly how the person positioned when the person was shot. Can you do that?
Not in this case, because there's so many factors that come into play. Without knowing the position that the shooter was in, how tall the shooter is, the position of the hand and the gun, you can't really say that.
Did you recover the projectile that we saw in the x-ray from her body?
Yes, it was recovered.
Can you explain how you did that?
Sure. So while we are doing the autopsy, I'm noting the injuries as I go along. And from the x-ray, I have an approximate location of where the projectile should be. So I can say I'm looking at the injuries, and then I follow the path of the projectile until I could actually find the projectile. It's not always easy to find. Sometimes we have to dig a bit deeper. But in this case, it was like in the left abdominal wall. And after which we retrieved it and submitted it as evidence.
Showing what's been introduced as photograph 5 of state 16. What is this show?
That's a projectile.
Is that the one you recovered from?
Yes.
claims to mark the state's exhibit Z for identification. Do you recognize that item?
I do.
What letter did you say?
Z.
Z.
Zebra. What is that item?
So this is the envelope with my signature and with the projectile is.
Can you open that up, look inside, tell me if you recognize the
I
contents?
can. So yes, I do. There's a projectile inside the envelope.
And what is it?
A projectile.
Is it the same or substantially the same condition as when you collected it from Ms. Owens' body?
It is.
This time, state would move Z as in zebra into evidence as 17.
No objection, Your Honor.
The objection, Z will be in evidence as states number 17.
Except for the injury to her right wrist and the gunshot wound, did you see any other evidence of fresh trauma to Ms. Owens' body?
There was none.
Was a toxicology screen done on Ms. Owens?
Yes, one was performed.
And what are you looking for when you do that?
So we're looking for any drugs or substances in the body.
What were the results of that toxicology screen?
Her screen was completely negative.
Okay. Completely negative, meaning no alcohol, no drugs, nothing in her system.
Correct.
Are you anticipate being paid for your time here today, correct?
Correct.
In any work that you've done to prepare for trial?
Correct.
What do you charge an hour?
For criminal cases, 300 per hour.
And about how many hours have you devoted to this case since you left the medical examiner's office?
So, including trial prep, doing my own, and including driving here, which is about like 2 hours each way. So it's probably around 5.5 to 6 hours.
And when you worked for the medical examiner's office and actually performed the autopsy, you were getting paid because you were a state employee through your salary, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and now that you left, you're entitled to be paid for the time since you've left.
Yes, correct.
Fair enough. Thank you, Doctor. No other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Before we have cross-examination, I want to remind everybody in the courtroom, your phone needs to be off. Unless you're a credentialed member of the media. Please do not text from the courtroom. If I see you texting from the courtroom or appearing to be texting from the courtroom, your phone's going to be seized and returned to you at the end of the session. Just fair warning to everybody, okay? Cross-examination. Sure.
Judge, I had a couple other questions before we commit.
Yes, sir?
Did you determine the cause of death in this case?
I did.
What was it?
So the cause of death was a gunshot wound of the torso.
What was the manner of the death?
Homicide.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir, thank you. Good morning.
Hi,
Nice
good
to
morning.
see you again.
Likewise.
Miss Owens was 35 years old when she passed away, is that right?
Yes, she was.
And based on the autopsy that you did on her, she was well-developed and well-nourished when she passed, right?
Correct.
She seemed healthy and strong based on your autopsy, is that right?
Yes, she was.
She weighed 293 pounds at autopsy, right?
Yes.
Which means that that's what she weighed when she passed away, right?
Correct.
And she was 5'7" at autopsy, right?
Yes.
Now, you have no idea what caused the abrasion to her right hand, is that right?
So I'll say it's a blunt force injury. So something, I guess it's some kind of blunt force trauma, or maybe like her striking a hard surface or something else striking her.
The trajectory of the gunshot wound was downward, is that right?
Yes, it was.
And the projectile entered her body in her right chest,
Yes.
and it traveled from right to left, is that right?
Correct.
In a downward angle.
Correct.
There's no way that you can tell us if the projectile going through the ribs and organs it went through, whether that influenced the trajectory, correct?
It could. The rib is a bone, so it could slightly change the angle of the projectile.
But you can't tell us with any amount of certainty.
Correct.
You can tell us that Miss Owens was most likely in an upright position when she was shot, but nothing else in regard to her positioning, is that right?
Correct.
And you cannot tell us if she was right or left or anything like that, correct?
I can't.
Now, because there was a door between the gun and Miss Owens, you can't tell us how far the gun was from Miss Owens, is that right?
I cannot.
Not without looking at the door, right?
Correct.
And you haven't looked at the door,
I
correct?
have not.
You testified that the manner of death is homicide, right?
Yes, I did.
And the term homicide and the way you are using it is a medical term, not a legal term, correct?
Correct.
In the medical community, homicide refers to a death occurring by the hands of another, right?
It is.
So in other words, by saying homicide in this case, you are saying that someone else shot Miss Owens, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't suicide or anything like that, right?
Correct.
This medical determination does not answer legally if a manslaughter occurred, right?
Correct.
This medical determination does not answer legally if a crime occurred, correct?
Correct.
This medical determination does not answer if legally this occurred because an individual was acting in self-defense, right?
Correct.
This medical determination does not answer if legally this occurred because an individual was standing their ground, correct?
Correct.
Punching, kicking, and/or hitting another individual with fists and other parts of the body can cause great bodily harm, is that right?
Repeat that question.
Anytime punching, kicking, and/or hitting another individual with fists and other parts of the body can cause great bodily harm, right?
It can.
Especially if the person being hit has medical infirmities and is older, correct?
It can. It depends.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Need to redirect?
No questions, Your Honor.
She excused?
She is.
Have a nice day, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.